When Pandora: The World of Avatar was first announced back in 2011, many wondered how well this blockbuster IP would integrate into the larger animal kingdom. After all, how can you reasonably combine a film set entirely on a fictional planet with a park that aims to celebrate the wildlife and ecosystems of our own world? I was among the many skeptics, but after getting a chance to visit Pandora, I realized how misplaced my doubt really was. I loved walking among the floating islands, enjoying the local cuisine, interacting with some fauna, and encountering the mystical shaman. But it was really my ride on a Banshee in Flight of Passage that changed my mind about Pandora deserving a place at Disney. In fact, after 20 years, Animal Kingdom may finally have found a thesis attraction that imparts the ethos of the park better than any other single experience. My name is Greg Grabarek, and this is the Q-Line Lectures, a series about theme park design. I think Animal Kingdom as a whole is open to many different interpretations. It's certainly interested in conservation, adventure, the diverse culture of developing nations, and, animals, obviously. But as we look a little closer at its attractions, I think another theme starts to emerge. Expedition Everest isn't just about encountering a surprisingly lifeless Yeti, it's about that Yeti fighting back against the train running through its home. Kali River Rapids has a beautiful rainforest being destroyed by huge machinery. Even the Kilimanjaro Safari tells a story about a reserve fighting back against intruding poachers. Everywhere you look, there are reoccurring themes of the messy collision between civilization, nature, and technology. Oftentimes, the collision of these forces are shown to result in disastrous outcomes. But what if they didn't? What happens when you peacefully merge these three ideas? That's the question that I think Pandora, and specifically Flight of Passage, addresses. A huge key to the ride's success is the way it introduces its key theme in its enormous queue. This queue is primarily split into three sections: the outdoor trail, the tight constricted Na'vi cave, and the scientific laboratories built on the remains of a mining operation. It's clear that immense effort went into not just theming these areas, but differentiating their design to highlight the factions and ideas they represent. A small detail I love is how the shape of the line itself changes as it progresses. In the beginning outdoor section, it meanders and flows in a really unique and naturalistic pattern. Notice how there are basically no straight lines or harsh 90-degree angles. Even a section like this is effectively a straight path, gently curves back and forth as if the line itself was carved out of a river or stream. The path is also very sprawling and actively avoids doubling back on itself, which gives the impression of journeying further and further away from the entry. Now compare that to the linear switchbacks and huge straightaways of the indoor lab sections. Here the line doesn't curve at all, and compact design puts you in maximum contact with the other guests. There's no doubt anymore that the path we are following is man-made. The ride is asking us to consider the different forces at play here between what is natural and what is manufactured. I draw that distinction because we're going to see how often the ride begins to break down the barrier between nature, civilization, and technology. A key area of this cue to understanding this theme of fusion is right when you move into the cave of the mining facility. This is the first time we enter a recognizably human space, and you can't help but be struck by how, ugly this room is. It's drab, dirty, decaying, and industrial. The way the room expands to an odd size only emphasizes how unnatural this space is. It almost feels like we took a wrong turn and ended up in a backstage area. Turning the corner into the next room, however, something changes. When we imagine the Earth retaking our cities after humanity is long gone, we often picture this kind of decay. Weeds sprouting down city streets, vines overtaking crumbling skyscrapers. It's a visual metaphor for death, namely our death as a species. But here those same images are flipped on their head. The ugliness of the last room gives way to life. Just listen for a bit. Bioluminescent plants cover the walls and sprout from a mess of industrial tubing. A chorus of creatures sings above us, finding a home in this space that was previously so inhospitable. Here there's no differentiation between the organic and the inorganic, just a messy, beautiful hybrid of the two. Once you see that theme, it becomes impossible to ignore in other places. Look at the way these large plants are used as lanterns to light the external queue at night, showing that something that looks like nature is actually technology. That idea is then mirrored much later in the science lab. Here we see what looks to be some sort of DNA double helix and some strange alien-looking substance trapped in a tube. In reality, though, these special effects are nothing more than air bubbles flowing through water and iron shavings in a magnetic field. Now it's nature being passed off as technology instead of the other way around. Another one of my favorite examples is the cave paintings. When we first enter the Na'vi cave, we see how the walls are covered with drawings of banshees and their riders. It's impossible not to compare this to how we view cave paintings in our reality. Being some of the earliest markers of human existence, they show some of our first interactions as a civilization, where we pick up our newfound tools and place a lasting mark on the walls of nature itself. Now go forward to this section of the lab scene. The cave has changed, but we're still painting on the walls, still using the same ancient technology to tell the story of banshees and their riders. So what is the significance of these stories? Once we enter the formal pre-show, our friendly scientist tells us we are going to link our consciousness with that of an avatar in order to fly a banshee as part of a Na'vi rite of passage. First, I don't think it's insignificant that we're taking part in a ceremonial rite of passage. What does this represent, other than its own fusion of an individual joining the larger ideological group? Beyond that, our connection with our avatar is probably the ride's most obvious expression of its themes. We're using the advanced technology of these link chairs to combine human civilization with the Na'vi, who are a clear stand-in for the natural world. This is an incredibly difficult concept to explain and sell believably to guests, but the ride takes its time and uses lots of small touches to make sure this fusion concept is clear. This starts with seeing the jaw-dropping avatar animatronic floating in the glass tube, and continues all the way till boarding. I love the way the pre-show analyzes everyone in the room and shows them a picture of the avatar they're going to be matched to. And then once you sit down in your link chair, you can feel the restraint vibrating up and down your spine, emphasizing how this technology could feasibly work to put your consciousness in a different body, just like the one seen in the tube. I think I've made this story of fusion that I think the queue is trying to tell very clear. But what we haven't gotten to yet is the product of that fusion, which I think is answered by the ride itself. The first thing that struck me once getting off Flight of Passage for the first time was how narratively sparse it is. Compare this to any other ride based on a movie or franchise, and the difference is pretty striking. There are no lines of English dialogue. There are no heroes or villains battling it out over a valuable object. In fact, there aren't any recognizable characters or locations. For a company that consistently emphasizes their commitment to story, it's surprisingly daring that Flight of Passage is a ride without one. But I think it's made all the better for that choice. Flight of Passage elicited the strongest emotional gut reaction from me of any ride at Walt Disney World, and that doesn't happen by accident. It uses motion, music, smells, and especially the visuals to make a compelling case for the sublime, or transcendent beauty of the world around us. This unknowable and unattainably lofty beauty is what I think Flight of Passage argues is possible when technology, civilization, and nature exist together in harmony. It's at once resonantly powerful and laughably simple. In order to capture this feeling, I think Imagineers turned to the classical artwork of the sublime to inspire the visual design of Pandora. The definition of the sublime in art is pretty amorphous, but was described by Cambridge professor of aesthetics Damien Freeman as, quote, an enigmatic experience that involves our taking pleasure in being overwhelmed by sights, sounds, sensations, or ideas that are larger, greater, or more powerful than us, or otherwise threatening to us, unquote. That might be difficult to imagine how that translates to visuals, so let's just sit back and compare scenes from Flight of Passage to famous works of sublime art. At the start of this video, I said that Flight of Passage could be a thesis statement for Animal Kingdom as a whole. That might seem like a stretch, but what is Animal Kingdom if not an attempt to bring together huge crowds of civilization, a wide variety of wildlife, and cutting-edge technology in its attractions? Even the star icon, the Tree of Life, embodies these ideals. Its outside resembles a giant tree, but inside it's actually the retrofitted steel skeleton of an oil rig. So does everything in Animal Kingdom come together to make an experience that could be described as sublime? I'll leave that to you to decide. Thanks so much for watching.